Getting your dinner?
Yeah.
Good evening. Oh, let's make sure this is here. Good evening. The regular meeting of the Grass Valley City Council, Capital Improvement Authority and Redevelopment Successor Agency, 7 p.m. Tuesday, July 10th, 2018. City Council welcomes you to its meetings. We are scheduled at 7 p.m. on the second and fourth Tuesdays of each month. Your interest is encouraged and appreciated. This meeting is being broadcast live on Comcast Channel 17, and this meeting is being recorded by NCTV and is scheduled for rebroadcast on NCTV Channel 17. Please consult NCTV's program listings. In addition to being broadcast live on TV, it is also being broadcast live on the internet at www.cityofgrassvalley.com. Look at the meetings on video site, City Council, in the lower portion of the homepage. This meeting is also recorded on audio tape. Council chambers are wheelchair accessible and listening devices are available. Other special accommodations may be requested to the city clerk 72 hours in advance of the meeting. Action may be taken on any agenda item. Please turn off all cell phones or similar devices. Agenda materials are available at City Hall, the City Grass Valley Public Library, the Royce, or the city's website by clicking on each of the PDF icons. Staff reports and background information related to regular agenda items are available at City of Grass Valley City Hall. Materials related to an item on this agenda submitted to the council after distribution of the agenda packet are available for public inspection at City Clerk's Office, 125 East Main Street during normal business hours. Such documents are also available on the City of Grass Valley website at www.cityofgrassvalley.com, subject to the city staff's availability to post documents before the meeting. So I now call the meeting to order. Arnie, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Pleasure having you do that. Thank you. Christy, would you please do roll call?
Councilmember Aguilar?
Yes.
Councilmember Arbuckle?
Yes.
Councilmember Foyer?
Here.
Vice Mayor Swarthout?
Yes.
Mayor Levine?
Present.
5 members present tonight.
Agenda approval. The City Council reserves the right to hear items in a different order in order to accomplish business in the most efficient manner.
One change from staff, we
Okay.
would like to remove item 3, and we will bring that back at a later date.
That's item 3 is under the consent agenda, right? Yeah, okay.
Correct, the item on the Wolf Creek Trail project.
Report out of closed session. Ed, there's nothing to report out of closed session. So, okay. Introduction and presentations. Tonight there are none at this time. I believe you're under public comment, is what you wanted to talk, yeah. So this is the next item, public comment. There's time limitation of 3 minutes per person for any items that are not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction or interest of the city. Please come to the podium at this time and speak into the microphone on these items. And so, just so the public knows that we hear the item, but we don't comment on the item. So, and then if you wish to speak regarding a scheduled agenda item, please come to the podium when the item number and subject matter are announced and speak into the microphone. Recognize, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Anyone wishing to submit written information at the meeting needs to furnish 10 copies to the city clerk in advance to allow for distribution to city council staff and the media. And the 3-minute timer is those little green, yellow, and red dots in front of you. Oh, and it's you. How do people just jump up? It's like having a stage where people just lift up behind.
Can't stay away.
Yeah. Welcome
My
back.
name is Ed Thomas, Grass Valley, California. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I just left a training for guest services at World Fest, which starts Thursday night. And I just want to encourage people in Grass Valley to give it a shot. It's going to be a great 3-day music festival, lots of stuff for the kids to do, indigenous peoples areas, and a new stage, all kinds of great things. It's just amazing what the Center for the Arts with their World Fest does to put on this event. So if you can, give it a try. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
I'm here representing Foothill Lions Club of Grass Valley. We've taken on DiMartino Park, or Martino Park, as a project, and we've done several things there over the past 5 or 6 years. We're getting to the finishing point, which we've committed ourselves to do, and that is the sign. And that's taken a long time because of finding the right sign maker, getting the right colors, wording, and that sort of thing, and the logo for the city. And it's finally been approved, and we're going to install that sign next Tuesday, the 17th, at 10 a.m. And I want to encourage the council members to try to be present. You know, Dee was the first woman mayor of Grass Valley, and she was a member of our club. And she got to see the prototype of this sign before she passed, and she loved it. So I encourage you to join us on the 17th at 10 a.m. Thank you.
Yes. Please make sure we get a notification reminder. Thank you.
Matthew Coulter, Grass Valley. I filled out work orders and asked repeatedly for the graffiti to be painted off the park benches in both Glenn Jones Park and now Memorial Park. Just before I came here, I made a call to dispatch to have the graffiti that was going on there stopped. The officer didn't see the graffiti, bypassed it, and said it didn't happen. I walk through there daily. I see it grow daily, and there's just a certain group of young men that are doing it, and after walking through Happy Camp over there at Loma Rica and talking to quite a few people, I have a sneaking suspicion the same group of 23-year-olds is going through that camp and strong-arming the homeless and stealing from them both drugs, money, and anything they can get. This has been going on off of Sutton Way for quite a while now. Recently on the front page of the Sacramento Bee, there was one gentleman that took $150,000 in services in 1 year, a homeless man in Sacramento. I know that we have people living out there in that area that have sucked up quite a bit of services. One gentleman I talked to out there has been repeatedly taken to the hospital and repeatedly moves back out into the woods and is a very sick individual. The fire danger out there is super extreme, and now Timberwood Estates, with their expansion, has cut off access to the whole backside of that property where firemen would need to lay a hose to get access to that. Now they all have to come off a Sutton Way to get access, and also the police. Last night I listened to a kind of an interesting scenario of police trying to get through the blackberries across the creek to the people that were calling. And even now we have people calling in that are in distress that they don't have a house number or a location, so what they're doing is giving a GPS coordinate. And then people are going out there to take care of them. Some way, shape, or form, the city really needs to get a grip on the fire danger that's encompassing the town on all sides of it and all open spaces, with people that are extremely mentally ill and aren't aware of the fire danger, to be particular. And then within town itself, we have a woman living in a doorway up the street here for several days. She'll stay there until she's covered in enough feces that someone will move her, clean her, and then she comes back. I would hope the city could do something about these problems that seem to be perpetuating and growing by the day in our city, and it is pretty disheartening, to tell you the truth, by the lack of concern and lack of motivation by townsfolks to really take care of their areas. And that goes for not just the graffiti artists, but people also that live out of town that assume that their properties are just fine the way they are, even though they haven't seen them in 10 years. And we are going to suffer the consequences in fire. Thank you.
Marnie Marshall, Echo Ridge Drive, Grass Valley. Just here to speak on behalf of the Grass Valley Downtown Association and let you know that we're still having our Grass Valley Thursday night markets. We have 4 more of those to go. Thursdays 6 to 9. We have music and craft vendors, and the stores are open. And we have a beer and wine garden, and we have some exciting new things happening this next week. We have a fleet of classic cars on the top of Main Street. We're also going to have a big 8-foot stand-up of the old cowboy that used to be the sign in Grass Valley in 1900. And some other exciting things. There's a photographer taking pictures in front of the Grass Valley mural for free or donation, and David Wong has donated his time for that. So that's a nice family picture. And then I want to support the downtown merchants in their inside sidewalk sale that's happening on the 13th, 14th, and 15th. So there are various stores, mostly on Mill Street, between 10 and 5 on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, having big sales. And that's it. And more information about all our events are at www.downtowngrassvalley.com.
Is there any other public comment? Not seeing any. Closed public comment area. Consent items. All matters listed under the consent calendar to be considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless before the City Council votes on the motion to adopt. Members of the council, staff, or the public request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate discussions and action. This is a roll call vote item. Are there any withdrawals from other than item 3 from staff, from the council? Staff? Anybody else? Not seeing any. Listen to a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Christie, please.
Councilmember Aguilar,
Yes.
Councilmember Arbuckle,
Yes.
Councilmember Foyer,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Swarthout,
Yes.
Mayor Levine.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Item H7, collection of delinquent sewer and water accounts on the Nevada County tax roll recommendation. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Levine and council members. I'm Mike Bussey, Public Works Director of Operations for the City of Grass Valley. Last year, after holding a public hearing, council adopted Resolution 2017-32, requesting that the County of Nevada levy and collect delinquent water and sewer service charges on the tax roll. This method has proven to be very effective and allows the city to collect charges from customers that are severely delinquent with payment. This year, the delinquent amount as of May 15th, 2018 was $280,943.63. And as of July 6th, 2018, that amount has been reduced to $25,540.71. Annually, affected property owners are notified by mail. This year, 55 notifications were sent out on June 20th. Of those, 15 are scheduled to go on to tax rolls. Staff recommends that council adopt Resolution 2018-37, requesting the County of Nevada levy and collect delinquent water and sewer charges on the tax roll.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions of staff? I just want to say what a pleasure it is to have you at our meetings on a regular basis now. It's great.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. This is a notice public hearing. I'm going to put it out to the public if there are any questions or comments on this item. Not seeing any. I'll bring it back to the dais and be looking for a motion on this rather routine item.
I'll make the motion to adopt Resolution 2018-37, requesting the County of Nevada levy and collect delinquent water and sewer service charges on the tax roll. Sorry.
Second.
I think this could be a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Howard, can I interject you real quick? Because I see Jim, Rita, and Frankie in the back, and I don't think they realized that their item was on the consent and you're approved. So I didn't want you guys to have to stay here for the entire evening,
Good
not
observation.
knowing that.
Oh, you should have let them stay. It might be interesting.
Thanks. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Well, at least through the public hearings, yeah. Okay, item 8 is public hearing to consider a report for abatement costs and placement of those costs on the tax roll for 331 Bennett Street, APN 009-261-04.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tom Last, Community Development Director. Again, staff is recommending the adoption of the two resolutions referenced by the mayor. And the purpose is to recoup abatement costs associated with 331 Bennett Street. This property has quite a bit of a history where the city has been involved with abatement, which started over 10 years ago the first time, in which the city removed an old abandoned home and also did extensive weed and tree removal because of the fire hazard. That was again in 2007. Since then, the fire department was engaged in doing another weed abatement process several years ago. And then last year, the reason we didn't address or impose the abatement costs on the property previously is there's been a lot of uncertainty of the property ownership, and that's why the city took a active role in abating this property. It's still very uncertain in terms of the relationships and who owns and ultimately who's responsible for maintaining this. The fire chief has done quite a bit of outreach with the currently listed owner based on the tax rolls, and they've indicated they are unwilling to pay for those abatement costs that occurred last year, but they did note that, we did indicate that we would be going through this process and imposing those fees on the tax roll. So they understood that and were not, so much receptive to that. So the current abatement costs include mastication of the entire property that occurred last year, late spring, early summer. And then we've also had two herbicide sprayings that have taken place to try to keep the blackberries from growing back. So the cost to dates are conservative $4,309.12. And these costs do not count for all of staff time. It's primarily been my staff time, a little bit of the city attorney's office, and then the actual physical work we've had to pay the firms to do the actual work. So based on that, we are requesting council adopt these two resolutions and place this on the tax roll. Any questions?
Questions?
Yeah, just real quick question. I mean, how long do we have to continue to do this? I mean, we have a non-responsive owner. Do we continue to do this until we have no equity left in the home? I mean, what?
The home there now is this property. Well, we felt we had to take at least this step and hopefully get somebody's attention, and we'll see if that works. With the herbicide spraying, we're hoping that's going to at least, we've done 2 consecutive ones now. We may do one more in the fall. That should hopefully alleviate blackberries from returning, but again, those costs are pretty nominal for just spraying it. If we stay on top of it, it's a few $100s for every time they have to go out there. But yeah, that could be, we're hoping this doesn't become a long-term issue. That's why we're hoping to get some attention with this.
Any other questions? I just, my question is why we're not including staff time.
Just my staff time to date.
We're including other staff time then?
No, we did not.
Okay.
We did not. There was a little bit by the fire chief and others. We just did not account for some of that.
Okay. But whoever's doing the abatement is a private contractor then?
Private contractor did the abatement and also the spraying.
Okay. This is a notice public hearing. If anybody has any questions, please come to the podium at this time and ask.
Matthew Coulter, what's the size of that lot? Approximately.
I have no idea. I'm not looking at the parcel. Maybe half acre.
You know the volume of chemicals that are being sprayed on it?
Well, or by the professional, or,
Sure.
yeah, so,
It's
no.
been oversprayed. It's right on the edge of South Fork, Wolf Creek. I don't think you'll need to spray it again for about 10 years. You guys have done a wonderful job with toasting that place. As well as the parking lot on Main Street with the spraying that I drove through and saw that today. It does nothing for the fire danger to kill the already existing live plants. They just sit there dead and there's still a fire danger. But I'm more concerned with the spraying of the mass amounts of herbicides right on the edges of our waterways. Wolf Creek and South Fork Wolf Creek. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comments? Adopt that, I close public hearing. Either a motion or any other comments?
I make a motion that we adopt resolution 2018-34. Oh wait, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. What's this?
2018, 58,
58,
58,
59.
59.
28, sorry, 28, 58, and 59 to impose a special assessment on the tax rolls for assessor's parcel 09261-04 for abatement costs and request the Nevada County Auditor Controller collect the assessment for the city.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, administrative items. Administrative items are not public hearings, but we do allow the public to comment on them. So the first one is number 9, addition and adjustment of waste management service rates and a presentation on recycling trends and issues. And, okay, Trish. Trish,
Yeah,
are you going to stay
just,
here too?
I have to have a few words. so.
Okay.
This is just a continuation from the June 12th, 2018 meeting. And at that meeting, the council requested waste management representatives just return with a community outreach plan that addressed some of the changes that have been occurring in recycling and just some of the other educational outreach efforts they've been dealing. And Tisha Gill from Waste Management is here to walk through what has taken place since then and the plan to move forward on outreach. So staff is still recommending adoption of the resolution at the end of the presentation.
Thank you for having me, Mayor Levine and council members. So this is a follow-up from the meeting 2 weeks ago, and we met with Levine and the city, I want to say about 2 weeks ago, and discussed an action plan and some items that we could do to help alleviate some of the contamination and help with the education. So we developed a proposal and submit it to the city I think it was the beginning of this week or last week? Last week. So first and foremost, we wanted to conduct a characterization study and understand where you guys stand today in terms of contamination and get that true number for you. So that's something that we want to do and be able to provide to you guys. And then secondly, we'll be doing some outreach via a flyer will be going to customers, all the customers, explaining what can be recycled and what's contamination. That flyer is also going to be, there's going to be a sticker made which we can attach to customers' carts and bins. For those customers that we continue to see an issue with contamination, we can place that sticker on those carts or bins. We will be reaching out to KNCO to do a live interview to answer questions for customers regarding contamination and recycling questions, in addition to 2 other radio ads that discuss recycling and how to properly recycle and what would be included in contamination. We're doing a press release to the union as well, and we'll work with them to do a half-page or a page ad explaining contamination and what that looks like. And events. So we'll be attending events. I attended I want to call it the farmer's market, but Thursday night market. Great market, by the way. A lot of people attend that market. It was a lot of fun, actually. We had some folks attend our table and did ask, there were plenty of questions out there with regards to recycling. So we do have a game that we play that customers can basically test themselves and see how they are with recycling. And so it was a bit eye-opening. And definitely, in my opinion, it's nice to be able to get out there and get in front of the customers and really talk to them about these questions that they have. So we'll continue on with those, and any additional recommended items that the city has for us, we'll definitely add to the list.
Any questions, or do you thought of any other items, or you've been putting your
Stewing about this for 2 weeks.
yeah you've been
I appreciate the work that you've done. I actually attended the Nevada City Council meeting a couple weeks ago when you had your same discussion there.
I felt they were a lot meaner than we were in Grass Valley, but ultimately they approved it with only one, so it's kind of a wash. We made you come back twice, but I saw you guys at the Thursday night market. I didn't have a chance to come over and take the quiz, but it looked like people were, and hopefully you guys are going to come back and do that again. I just think it's a continual education for people, and the more public outreach we can do, the more success we'll have in the recycling and the better it will be for your company.
I agree.
Appreciate the efforts.
Okay, I have the flyer. I came in my waste management bill yesterday. Good timing. And I was looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, so by looking at, this is what it will be coming of those of you who have not received it yet. This is what you'll be getting. I would venture to say that 90% of the customers don't recycle correctly, especially with the new regulations. And I have a couple of questions. I mean, it shows on this flyer things that are recyclable. It says recycle all bottles, cans, and paper. And it shows a picture of a can without labels. So are people supposed to take the labels off?
No, they just try to keep it very generalized so that you don't, it's not branded.
Okay, so it's any tin can, any bottle.
Aluminum and plastic bottles 1 and 2.
And glass?
Is this recyclable?
Yes.
And glass bottles?
Yep.
Glass bottles, glass jars? Okay, so it says keep items clean and dry. So does that mean people are supposed to wash them out and dry them and then put them in recycling?
As best as you can. There's the extreme that we've seen people put them in dishwashers. That's not necessary. But I would say a clean rinse if it's full of gook, and definitely dump it out. And if it's clean after you dump it and it's not necessary to wash it out, then don't go to that extreme.
Okay, and it says no plastic bags. I would venture to say that most people put plastic bags in their recycling bin thinking that they are recyclable.
Right.
Correct?
And in the past, we had a bag in the bag program where you could actually bag your bags into a plastic bag and kind of create a ball, and we would accept them. And so a lot of people probably do believe that, and that's something that we have to kind of uneducate, we have to get people re-educated with the fact that we want to take that item out. We did we banned the bag, 2 years ago, I think, here? So that was very helpful because you see less of those in this area. However, they're still there, and they ruin the systems. They fly around. They're not recyclable.
Plastic trash bags that most everybody uses, puts them in. Those cannot go in
Trash.
They have
Even
to
your
go in the
sandwich
trash.
bags are trash.
So from just reading this and being not a really good person to recycle, self-admitted, I would venture to say I'm going to throw everything in the trash.
Well, in the
Because
past,
I'm not going to wash my jars out. Tin cans, they need to be washed out as well. If I'm reading this correctly.
well, if they're full of food, if it's got contaminants in it. Mm-hmm.
They need to be washed out as well. Is that correct?
Anything that has a contaminant in it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, second question that I just found out today, and I already know the answer to this, but I'm asking the question so that it's out there.
Yep.
Things that are recyclable that can be turned in for cash value
CRV. Mm-hmm.
cannot go into the recycle bin. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct.
Okay.
That is the CRV absolutely can go into your toters. Yes. You can also take them out and cash them in for yourselves. You have 2 options, yes, but
They can go in
absolutely.
to the recycle
Yep.
thing.
Mm-hmm. Those are usually 1 and 2s. Those are 1 and 2s for the plastics.
They're plastic,
Yep.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if they're glass CRVs, then of course they can go.
Bottles, beer bottles, wine bottles, vodka bottles.
Big wine bottles, yeah, like super
To your
magnums.
point, this flyer was made probably, we started developing this 2 months ago. The one that we're putting in the next bill insert is strictly geared towards being much clearer on the contamination piece.
This was not real clear.
Right, that was probably built like 2 months ago. The next one is going to be strictly about contamination. That bill insert, I think, was about
You know, and I
fire
s-
hazards and a couple of other things.
And I said this last time, and I mean, seeing this, and the more I see it, I just see more and more people not recycling. And for just using it into their trash, maybe even getting rid of their recycle bin, because only thing that, that won't be, you know, that it won't have very many things in it other than maybe newspapers and cardboard boxes. But, so, I mean, doesn't that defeat the purpose of the whole recycling thing?
It does, and it's unfortunate. That's just unfortunately, I think that what we're faced against right now, it's not something that Waste Management has decided, or any hauler for that matter. This is basically, the market where we're selling it. They don't want the product if it's contaminated. They don't there's no market for 3 through 7s. So I would hate to see somebody recycle less. I really would. But I also would hate to see a contaminated item go into a bale of really clean product and then ruin that whole bale. So I want to do the best that we can in educating the customers to do the right thing. And I understand that it's not a perfect science and not everybody's going to take that time to clean it out. And I just hope that people find that happy medium, right? They do the right thing, but they also, don't give up on it, right? I don't want that to happen. I just want to make sure that what goes into that bin is truly recyclable and it is baled and then finds its home.
And I understand your frustration, because it's very difficult for you, I'm sure. But, and then I have one more thing, the fees. How are they going to be levied against the people who don't recycle properly?
So the one that we're proposing, the residential fee? So we've had the commercial fee in the contract since its start date, which was, the contract went into effect July 1st, 2012. We've always had the ability to charge a contamination fee to commercial. We have just not done that. We've just not ever had this issue, right? So we're now faced with a time when contamination has become, a part of our fiber, and we have to really make it a better, find a solution and fix the problem. So we're now introducing the residential fee. We'll have both the commercial and residential. And when the drivers are visiting the homes and they notice that the can or the bin is contaminated, they're going to tag that cart. We have examples of all of this material that we'll be able to probably provide in the next week. But the new cart tag shows exactly what you can recycle. It explains 1s and 2s. We've revamped it. It also explains that if you continue this, you could be charged a fee. Doesn't say what, because we don't want necessarily that number on there. You're just going to have to update that number all the time. That's why we just put a rate. And then on the back, it explains, what can be and what shouldn't be. You'll get that tag a second time if you do it. You'll get it a third time, and the third time it would include the charge on your bill.
And you're not telling people what that fine will be?
We chose to put rate, just the word rate. You could be fined, a rate, but we could put the actual number.
I was just curious,
We've chosen in other areas just to leave the simple statement, you could be fined, or you could be charged a fine. The fine, I think, was on, sorry, I have a few different areas. I think it was either 10. It's at the very.
Cart contamination.
20.
Where's that commercial?
Commercials we already have a commercial. Contamination charge. Commercial contamination charge, just so you know, in the contract reads that if you contaminate your recycle bin by more than 5%, you'll be charged the trash rate. So if you have a trash bin and you pay $200 and you have a recycle bin and you pay I'm using fake numbers, but if you pay 50 and your recycling bin is contaminated, you could be charged 200 instead of the 50. So that's the way the commercial is designed. The residential is just a flat fee of $20.
For every time you're after
contaminating.
your second,
Third,
noted.
on your third.
third, and any consequential after that. $20 addition.
Correct.
And then the service restart fee, what is that going to be? And that's for businesses, am I understanding that correctly?
The service restart fee is only if you have to have your bin redelivered. And that's already established. That is $15 for the delivery.
Thank you. Ben, do you have any comments or questions? So, I understand Jan's frustration, and my concern as well is that people may be dissuaded from doing recycling. Our job is to try and keep them recycling as much as possible, and we, we'll ask you to keep recycling and try and work within the framework. So with bags like LDP4, number 4s, that are not recyclable, are the grocery stores still accepting those? They've had, containers at grocery stores to pick up the poly bags.
Yeah, I can say I've seen them at grocery stores. I can't speak to what happens to them after them. We aren't collecting them from grocery stores, so what they do with them, I'm not sure.
So, and that also includes newspaper bags. Yeah.
That little plastic bag around the newspaper.
Sleeve that. Right now we should be getting a rubber band and not a plastic bag. Would be great. That's a quote. The other thing I think for the council to consider is when things are not in the reuse cycle, that there might not be a need to use that material in our community. And I think we have to...
Plastic straws, is that what you're referring to?
No, expanded polystyrene containers, foam cups, foam takeout containers, and other items. We had a cry about not using plastic bags at grocery stores, I think. And, I'm not trying to be a hypocrite because I sold thousands of truckloads of foam product, and, I'm just as bad as everybody else. But I think now we have reached a different crisis that we can help alleviate, and I think we really need to consider that as a council, that we can take those kind of actions and moderate our use of some of those disposables. And then finally, some of us are overzealous in our recycling and want to recycle everything and try and moderate our ability and get educated on what the right things are to recycle. So, thank you.
I think that it is, people are starting to have a different mindset. It's going to take some time. But I love my plastic sandwich bags, but I realize how wasteful they are. And so trying to use containers instead of using that. There's a really great video going around on Facebook of this young woman who literally had 2 jars like this size with all of her waste for the year. Did you see that? Yeah. And literally she had like a couple of wrappers, and I'm sure it's very difficult and you have to be very conscious, but she didn't use, she filled her stuff in reusable bottles and, didn't buy plastic bottles of shampoo. I mean, it was really interesting to see what you can do if you really try. And even if we get just a little bit there where people aren't throwing as much stuff away because they're looking at their waste differently. We don't want to put you out of business, but definitely we'd like to have people have less trash to pick up every week. So reduce, yeah. So I think this is, for us, kind of the first step of, as people see the costs going up, I think that's what changes people's behaviors. So, and you know, I'm sorry that you guys aren't doing the bag in the bag anymore, because I generate a lot of plastic waste in my business, and it just goes all into the landfill. And some of my companies are getting better about, they don't pack things in plastic anymore. They just box it all up and send it. But anything that's imported is wrapped in plastic. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for starting this awareness program, and we'll do better.
I had two more quick comments. One is all you people who buy on Amazon and get all that packaging, remember what you have to do with it. You could buy it local and not take a bag and carry it home. So
It comes in a box.
cardboard and
It
some
is
other
But it has all that, usually it has a
It's-
bunch of plastic, bubble
it's
wrap or
got
whatever
stuff.
around whatever you buy.
The amount of cardboard is has it exploded?
It is, I never really experienced the Amazon thing until about a couple months ago, and I had no idea how much cardboard comes. Good news is cardboard is recyclable.
So, but you can reduce
It is a
your.
lot, though.
So the 3 R's are always important: reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Correctly.
And R, there's actually 4 R's.
What's the 4th R?
Rot.
Pardon?
Rot.
Rot?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
there's a new R.
Compost.
Right.
right.
But
Okay.
there's no place for compost yet anymore.
Oh, so
In your backyard.
Other than your backyard,
Yes.
so there's no place that you could go and
So-
take it anymore.
I know. The
So
local,
can it go in your green waste?
not here.
Not here.
No.
In Washington, it goes in your green waste or waste management.
Right, they have,
It is so different up
It-
there. It's crazy. So, okay. That's another thing I could talk
they
about.
have a closer facility now. We don't have one.
I'll make a
Okay.
motion.
Please. Oh, yeah, it is a comment. There is comment, yeah.
Comment and questions. Matthew Coulter, Grass Valley. Unfortunately, because we're dealing with a commodity, we're not going to catch up. Because the fact is, unless it makes money, waste management won't do it. I look at it as a health and safety issue. It's piling up in the creeks, the roadways, people's backyards. Even Circle says, not just you guys, but Recology, down where the U-boat runs into the Sacramento, that's where their yard is, and when it floods, it goes in the Sacramento River. Because there's no place to put all this stuff. They're just stockpiling it. They're stockpiling it and stockpiling it. And the handouts were super confusing. Thursday night market, I talked to your young rep for quite a while, and the handout was like, it was a different one from that one, I think, and it was super confusing. I was like, oh, I can do all this? Oh, no, you need to cross off this. It was like an old one, I guess. So it wasn't pertinent to what we're trying to tell people. It had all the old stuff on it. And it was like, oh, well, we need to cross this off. And then she wrote on there, oh, only 1s and 2s and not 3 through 7. So that wasn't even on there. I just believe that recycling, unfortunately, is dead because it has been made a commodity. And because of that, it's just not going to go anywhere. Your company doesn't require anyone to close their lids on their cans. So as far as things being wet, it's kind of a non-issue. The cans are topped off with water usually all winter long, both recycling and trash. So I don't know how that weight thing works out. And as well as other people using cans, a lot of the cans are left out on the street. Anyone can put anything in any can, which often happens. So you might have a pile of dog doo-doo in your recycling container. They're so deep, you can't really reach it to get it out of there. So there's a contaminated entire thing. So unless people were to lock them or have them on their property, I don't think that you can really penalize people for not having the right things in their recycling if all these containers are open to the public. It's just a unfortunate situation that we're in, and I believe the county, the city, needs to take extreme measures in the plastic area, I think it was Kenya and Africa. Now when you show up at the airport, they open your suitcase. They're not looking for drugs. They're not looking for contraband. Plastic. They take it away from you at the airport. Your plastic shampoo bottles, everything. Because they don't want it in their rivers. And that's where it all ends up, in the water. Wolf Creek. Thank you.
So, thank you very much for the presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Please come up. Yes. I didn't realize.
I'm a local businessman over here.
Please, name and address, please.
My name is Kabul Singh, and I have a couple of stations around here in the town.
Could you,
Can I go?
yeah, but you can, can you give us an address of,
Yeah, 107 East McKnight and 451 East Main Street.
okay.
If we make the recycling so complicated, waste management, people leaving recycling, the one you guys don't want, and the stations and some tires, some other things, waste management make it so hard for us. If I take them there to waste management, I have to make an appointment, schedule, set up a time. It's very time consuming, it's very complicated, very expensive in Grass Valley. I do business throughout the Northern California. I want them to make it easier, not harder, to customers. What they're doing is, if they cannot use that recycling bins, they're going to leave at the stations and some other places on the businesses, making more harder for us, sir. So I don't know where we can find a middle ground in there. I find a lot of things people don't unwanted, like gas cans, tires, they're leaving on the stations. When I take it that to waste management, they don't take it back because I'm a businessman. I have to make a schedule appointment. I have to. So it doesn't work. Waste management has to come make it more user friendly for businesses too, as we are opposed penalties, fees existing already enough, and people finding the waste as the river at the stations, causing more problems, sir. Hopefully, these guys can find some middle ground for easier for businesses too, sir. Thank you.
Cameras that on your pump areas
Yes.
and around your, okay.
Yes.
Because if people, this is just my observation, because I also own a business, if people leave things and you have cameras and you can identify them, that's actually a crime, and you can call the police. I mean, it's not a huge crime, but it is an infraction. And, you know, my pet peeve in this world is littering, and I consider that to be littering. People need to take responsibility for their own stuff, and if they're throwing that on you, it's within your rights as a business owner, if you could identify people with that to make, you know, you get license plate numbers if your cameras pick that up. And I know that that's probably not the easiest thing for you to do, but I'm not sure that Waste Management, as the billion-dollar company that they are going to change their policies on that sort of thing. We don't have any influence over that.
For example, somebody abandoned a gas can at my place. I made my due diligence. I put it on the side. I took it to Waste Management. Oh, let me see your address. Oh, you're a business. Make an appointment. Come back. I was doing the right thing, you know. I mean,
Right.
even people abandoned there. I took it to Waste. People abandon their tires there. You know, I try to recycle. You know, it is and when I get there, I mean, I see what they're trying to do, but they should make it easier for recycling people where they don't have to dump it. For businesses, can they make it easier instead of making it harder, more regular for us, so we can recycle, we can help the community, you know. I hope maybe I didn't make a sense.
Oh, you made it clear. We
Yeah.
understand what you're
Yeah.
saying. We're trying to find the balance as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your comment.
I really think what's going to happen is we'll have a recycling 2.0 will come out. Other folks will enter this market, compete with waste management of some sort. You know, Recology and other folks will start doing other things to where, you know, to be a little bit more friendly to the end user. So,
Sir, name and address if you're speaking to this comment, this item.
My name is Ashok Pandit. I've been a resident of Nevada County for the last 25 years. I didn't know city council meeting could be this educational. It's great. This first time in. One thing I want to, when we were talking about the flyers, was I know Seattle and San Francisco has a new thing coming up for the straws. I didn't hear anything on that. Another part was there's a city population. There's, as you know, our waste management is busy as it can be for 5 days out of the week, out of the 7. Education program for people that you're educating. We need to connect that with the education system too somehow with the schools.
Microphone one more.
Turn it.
No, it's on. Can you speak into it?
I'm sorry.
There you go.
That's better, I guess. So we need to connect that with education. I mean, adults are already spoiled, as you know. So maybe we can teach our younger generation somehow to do the right thing. So, and that's kind of way I see it. Thank you.
Very much for being here.
So why do you make businesses make an appointment?
I think he's speaking about HHW McCourtney Road Transfer Station, if I'm understanding him correctly. Yeah, commercial businesses, when they bring in product, they have to make an appointment. That's
That's
the
your
law.
policy or is that the county policy?
Right.
So that's the county, not waste management.
Nothing to do. Yeah, we're just following the rules that we have to abide by.
Okay, I just have one more thing. I understand what you want to do. I have a real problem finding people for the residential contamination. I have a really hard time with that. And I mean, I understand we need to approve the CPI. No problem with that. The service restart for businesses, I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with finding people for garbage. And Matthew made a really good point in the fact that I've seen people go, when they're walking their dogs or whatever, drop something in somebody's can, not paying any attention to whether or not it is a recyclable can or if it's the regular trash can, landfill can. So that person could theoretically be fined for a contamination that they did not do.
If it was more than 10% and if it was more than 3 times.
Right, and I know, and I understand that. I mean, where I live, there are people that make a circuit every day with their dogs. And I mean, I'm not saying that they drop it, but I have seen people do that. So unless anybody else, I would like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2018-34, adjusting service rates, but only adding the restart service fee, not adding the fee for residential contamination.
Clarify, the restart's not a new addition. We just noticed an error. Waste Management noticed that it was an error. It was
I just
marked
want to
too
take
high.
out the,
Okay.
in my motion, I want to take out the fee for residential contamination.
Can you speak to that, Gary, as far as our contract goes?
Yes, so the current franchise agreement, the CPI is baked into that, so that is something you need to approve this evening. The additional fees they're requesting, though, that is optional, and that is something the council can decide not to do.
I would agree with that. I mean, it is.
I just think it's an unfair fee, fine. It's not, it's a fee, but it's a fine. So I think that that's unfair. So my motion is to adopt Resolution 2018-34, adjusting service rates and just adding the service restart fee, eliminating number 2.
I will second that motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So that's where we are right now. And we'll revisit it if you come back at some point, I think.
So you come back every year?
Yeah, they come back, yeah. So we'll.
Well, actually, is there a way that you can come back and report to us and let's say by the end of the year, first of the year, to let us know how you're doing? How the recycling thing is going?
Yeah. Or how the community's doing.
Well, yeah, not how you're doing, but how the community is doing.
On that too. Yeah, that's no problem. And obviously,
Just to show that it's working.
Right.
Or not working.
Right.
Or you have less people with recycle cans
they're
because they're throwing everything in the trash.
And then we can revisit the fee issue then.
Yeah, or if there's a lot of contaminant or whatever. So there's a lot of things to look at, and this is obviously a new and dynamic subject that we can investigate for hours and hours and hours. So
A lot more than I ever thought possible.
garbage is big business. Disposables are fantastic, and plastics are the future.
Not stuff that Starbucks is not having
gra-
straws anymore.
The graduate.
They're gonna do,
Yeah.
paper.
Sippy
straws.
cups.
They're
Yeah.
gonna do paper straws.
Or they're gonna do sippy cups.
I was just trying to quote the graduate.
Oh, that's what
all.
they look
Yeah.
like.
Can't
There's
drink
little
the mocha without a straw,
Okay,
sorry.
thank you very much. Okay, appreciate all the time spent on that. Item 10, introduction of an ordinance repealing and replacing the general transaction and use tax. This recommendation is to waive further reading and introduce by title only ordinance of the City Council of the City of Grass Valley, repealing and replacing general transaction and use tax to be administered by the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. Thank you. Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Andy Heath, the city's finance director. The purpose of this item tonight is to actually repeal and replace ordinance number 740, which was approved by the city council in 2012, subsequent to the passage of Measure N at the time, which added a half-cent sales tax, transaction sales tax, to the city's 1% local tax that they do collect. With the recent passage of Measure E by the voters in June, that ordinance needs to be essentially updated to take the 1/2 cent tax up to 1 cent. All the other information that's in the ordinance will remain pretty seamlessly the same. You will still have the requirement for a Citizens Oversight Committee, as you have in there, and the annual audit, which are part of the Ordinance 740 that's being repealed and ultimately replaced. This item will come back to your City Council in 2 weeks for a second reading, a final reading, after which it will be adopted. And with that reading, we'll actually bring back some administrative agreements and a resolution that allow the city to work with the state to further implement the tax, which is essentially going to start on October 1st of this year. So with that, be happy to answer any questions you might have.
State Board of Equalization send a notice. Actually, we don't call it that anymore. What do we call it?
Department of Tax and Fee Administration.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
They changed it.
I
Will they send out a notice to all of the retailers in the district, in the city of Grass Valley, to tell them that they need to increase their sales tax by 0.5%?
I'm not sure if a notice will go out. I do know that when you file your taxes, you use an online system typically, and you use forms. Okay.
Well, but I have to. So it's people have to people need to know to reprogram their computer system or to adjust it. And typically, when this has happened in the past, the state board or whoever they are now, they send out a notice saying, this is your county. So a lot will depend on how many counties and cities had sales tax measures on the June ballot, and they send one out that says, if this is your county, this is your or city, this is your new tax rate. Can we find that out from the agency?
What I'll do is I'll find that out, and then with the staff report for the second reading of the ordinance, I'll put it in there.
Because if not, I think that the city needs to notice everybody.
Don't you get an email?
No, they still send. They still send paper for the taxing agency still sends paper for everything. They just this last month, I think in June, just changed it so you can only pay your tax online now. You can't send a check anymore. So they are, but they
I know the online system does have it's embedded in there on how much the district taxes are and the transactions taxes, any taxes you have to pay.
So, any other questions of staff? On the advisory committee for this, does that have to change, or can we continue with the representatives, or what's the?
Yes, the new tax does not come into play until October 1st. So right now we're still operating under the Measure N Oversight Committee, and we will be coming back to council to discuss the various options of how you would like to implement the new Measure E committee at the appropriate time.
Although this is an administrative item, if anybody has any comments or questions, please. Not seen anybody. I'd like to be a roll call vote if you make a motion. Yeah.
I would make a motion that we waive further reading and introduce by title only an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Grass Valley repealing and replacing a general transaction and use tax to be administered by the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration.
Second that.
Councilmember Aguilar?
Yes.
Councilmember Arbuckle?
Yes.
Councilmember Foyer?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Swarthout?
Yes.
Mayor Levine?
Yes, proud to do so.
Motion carries 5-0.
And then finally on the agenda tonight is the CalPERS discussion that you have been working diligently on.
Again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Andy Heath, the city's finance director. 2 weeks ago, the city did adopt its budget for fiscal year 18-19 that began about 10 days ago. With that budget, and as we presented the budget throughout the budget development process, you may recall that we stressed heavily how much the city was going to be paying CalPERS over the next 7 years, consistent with our model that we put together for a 7-year financial forecast. CalPERS is impacting all jurisdictions that are in CalPERS statewide, and we recognize the importance of assuring that your governing body understands exactly what's coming and the options that might be on the table to consider on how we might want to deal with this moving forward and some of the tools that exist. We do have a short presentation for you to go through some CalPERS specifics, specific to the plan as a whole, the state plan, and then also specific to the city of Grass Valley. We'll go through the unfunded actuarial accrued liability status. I'll talk about the 7 plans. A lot of people don't know that the city actually does have 7 CalPERS plans that it administers, what the framework and the components of those plans look like, and then what it costs to actually get out of CalPERS. Many jurisdictions have fronted that and asked staff to come back with what does it take to get out of CalPERS and how much is it going to cost. And it's significantly different than what you might think when you just look at the unfunded liability. So I'll give you a slide on that. And then I'll go through some unfunded liability funding options that exist for the council, and then give you a recommendation on where staff would like to go, given that your council, as part of the budget that's been adopted for this year, has set aside $1.75 million in a pension stabilization, essentially a reserve right now. It's not in any type of fund, but we'd like to put it in one, and you'll see that as a part of a recommendation. Looking at the CalPERS pension statistics for CalPERS as a whole, there's 1.9 million members in CalPERS. Of those members, public agency members, which are the members that you have here in the city of Grass Valley, and state members make up 31% each. And then you have school members, and a lot of people say, I thought school members were part of CalSTRS. These school members are the uncertificated members of the CalPERS system. So anybody that's certificated is actually part of CalSTRS, which is a completely different pension plan. So 1.9 million members in CalPERS. The annual retirement benefits paid by CalPERS is about $21.4 billion. So this is the amount that goes to the active annuitants that CalPERS does have. The current fund value as of April 30th, 2018 is about $353 billion. And its funded status, in other words, how much that $353 billion makes up what ultimately will be paid to the individuals as time goes on, is 71%. So CalPERS as a whole is 71% funded. This is the annual investment returns that CalPERS has earned over the last 10 years or so. And you can see that during the recession, which are the first two numbers on that graph, we experienced drops of 5.1 and 24% in terms of portfolio values. Those are the returns on investment. Then it came back as the economy began to recover, had some lower years and had some higher years. In a sense, though, the average over that 10-year period was 5.2%. This compares with CalPERS' current discount rate of 7.5%. Okay, so over the last 10 years, CalPERS has not made their discount rate. Recognizing that discount rates are probably going to need to be lowered, CalPERS did implement a policy change recently where over the next 3 years, beginning with this year, they will lower that discount rate to 7%. So this is the first year. Right now it's 7.375%. Be dropped to 7.25% next year, and then 7% in 2021. So what that will do is actually bring the average more in line with what the discount rate or the amount that CalPERS is expecting to earn on their portfolio back in line and more closer to each other. However, 5.2%, the difference between 5.2% and 7% when you're talking about a $353 billion portfolio and the unfunded liability associated with that 1.8% difference is very significant, and you'll see that. These are some recent and upcoming policy changes that CalPERS has put in place. And I wanted to just talk about the recent changes and some of the upcoming ones and give you an indication of the things that CalPERS is trying to do. But more importantly, also indicate to you that CalPERS is continually doing things to change the framework of how they compute the unfunded liability and how they manage their investment portfolio. These 3 things are recent. There have been numerous things in the past, over the past 5 or 7 years, that CalPERS has done that aren't even on here. What I'm trying to express is that there's significant volatility that's built in by CalPERS' continual policy changes to actually bring their investment rate or their discount rate or their portfolio investment strategy in line with what's actually needing to happen. And more importantly, to keep cities, jurisdictions, counties, special districts from having to deal with the impacts of these changes over time, because it's very difficult when you have a volatile payment stream year over year. A lower discount rate, we talked about that, from 7.5% to 7% is coming. They have a new portfolio asset allocation where they're putting less money into global equity to reduce the volatility associated with the investment rate, and more in fixed income. So that's could be a good thing, which is why they need to reduce that discount rate from 7.5% to 7%. And then also coming in a couple of years is where the first impact will be in a couple of years, is a prospective implementation of a shorter amortization period. So all of the gains and losses in the future, starting in fiscal 2021, will actually be amortized over a 20-year period instead of a 30-year period. What that means is if you have a big loss a couple of years from now, instead of amortizing that loss over 30 years, you're going to do it over 20 years, which is going to raise the amount of that unfunded liability. So there's still lots of changes coming with CalPERS. It's still a very volatile system in terms of its policy making, and they are trying to get it right, but it continues. We continue to have to be confronted with exactly what may transpire. This is an overview of the City of Grass Valley's plans. You can see we have 7 plans. We have 2 miscellaneous plans, 3 police plans, and 2 fire plans. You can see the classic plans, which are the top plans in each of those 3 groups, have the majority of the unfunded liability. These are the oldest plans that the city has on the books. People coming into the city now are not part of these plans unless you are a miscellaneous member. If you're a miscellaneous member coming from another jurisdiction into the City of Grass Valley, you will be placed into the miscellaneous 2.5 at 55. That's because you're what's termed as a classic employee. For police, you'll be put into Tier 2. The city made a decision prior to the implementation of the Public Employee Pension Reform Act to actually implement a Tier 2 system where instead of 3% at 50, members would earn 3% at 55. So you had to be 5 years older to draw that 3% per year retirement. Classic employees coming into the police department as laterals would be placed into that plan. And then any safety fire employees that are lateraling into our system would be 3% at 55. Then you see the PEPRA plans. PEPRA is for all new employees. So those employees that are new to the CalPERS system or have been removed from the CalPERS system for a period of 6 months or longer. But you can see that unfunded liability in totality is about $18 million. That is the city's unfunded liability that ultimately needs to be paid over time. You've seen this graph before. So this is the graph that discusses what that unfunded liability is, particular to the general fund and the major end fund, which is where the majority of staff exists. The blue bar, the blue portion of the bar represents the normal costs, and these are just the ongoing pension costs for employees on an ongoing basis. And then the red portion of the bar indicates the amortized component for the unfunded liability. You can see over time, and this is straight out of the actuarial reports for those 7 plans, over time that unfunded liability will rise by about $1.2 million in the next 7 years. So again, these are real numbers, and this is what the city has built into its forecast for the multi-year forecast. Just wanted to take a snapshot. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but in each actuarial report, the CalPERS will break down what that unfunded liability is made up of, where it came from, when it happened, and then how much you have to pay over time. Each year, CalPERS does this. They add something or they subtract something from your unfunded liability. These amounts are fixed in nature. So once they happen, and they really don't change over time. Each year, CalPERS will go back consistent with their investment loss or their investment gain, or changes in assumptions they make, other policy type changes, and actually add a new line for that. It won't impact these lines, so they're going to stay the same. But these lines are important because the city, as you'll see, has an option to actually pay off these lines to the extent it wants to. If you have additional funds that you want to set aside or actually use to pay down a liability, you can isolate one of these lines and actually pay that down. Probably not a good idea right now just because of the continued policy volatility, but in the future these charts may become very important when we're making decisions on how we want to recommend to the council to pay this down. These are CalPERS costs as a percent of the operating budget. So if you take the total operating budget for the general fund and the major end fund, and you look at the normal costs and the unfunded liability costs as a percentage of that budget as a whole, you can see that for 17-18, about 7.6% of the entire general fund and major end fund budget combined is going towards CalPERS. That's going to increase to about 9.5%, so a 2% budget increase by 2022-23. Okay, this is significant. Just under 10% of the city's budget goes towards CalPERS alone. Opting out. This is the true cost of actually leaving the CalPERS plan. What does that look like? Okay, you've seen in a couple of slides ago that when you add up all the unfunded liabilities for the 7 plans that the city does have, the UAL, the unfunded liability, is $18.2 million. When you actually want to get out of CalPERS and buy out of that and then start a brand new plan, whether it's a 401k or some other retirement savings plan that is not CalPERS altogether, CalPERS essentially puts you in what's called a termination pool. And what this termination pool is it recognizes that CalPERS now has the responsibility, once you pay it off, to make sure that those individuals in that system that have accrued the benefits they've accrued up to that time ultimately get paid those benefits over time. CalPERS does not use its 7% discount rate because it probably doesn't think that it's going to earn 7% long term, because many of those investments, as you have seen, are in things other than fixed income that are very volatile. They're in stocks, they're in real estate, and they're in some other investments. So this termination pool takes that pot of money, or that sum of money that the cities actually end up paying, and puts it all into fixed investments where there's a guaranteed rate of return that's between 1.75 and 3%. So now our unfunded liability is discounted at one of those rates, and you can see that to get out of CalPERS, the city would actually be confronted with a liability payment of $61 to $79 million.
That would make anybody
I get choked up. Those are big numbers. So,
We get it.
but that's the reality of the situation. To get out of CalPERS, it would take about a year, and we would have to come up with, up to $79.3 million to do that. So it's not very practical. Okay, so this unfunded liability doesn't go away. Okay, it's something we have to pay. It's something we're going to be paying over the next 7 years, and we know we're going to be paying incrementally more over the next 7 years, and we know CalPERS continues to put these policy changes in front of us that we really have to comply with, okay, and make the payments. So why would we set aside or pay more than required to deal with this? Number one, it takes a proactive stance versus a reactive stance in managing the total liability, where reactive means we just pay what they tell us to pay every year, which could be extremely different from 1 year to the next. Even though they give us a plan for 7 years, once that actuarial report comes out next month, all those numbers change. Okay, hopefully not too much, but they will change. It also helps mitigate future payment volatility. It recognizes that the unfunded liability is a long-term debt, and you need to think of it that way. This is a debt of the city. It's ultimately a debt that the city must pay over time, and helps create a plan that's catered to the city. And then it does something called mitigating service insolvency, where the more and more money that we put budgetarily towards CalPERS, we know we're going to be putting 2% more over the next 4 years, at least from an actuarial standpoint, of our budget towards CalPERS unfunded liability. The more we put in budgetarily there, the less we can put budgetarily somewhere else. So ultimately, you have this service insolvency that may ensue as a result of having to look at other services that may have to give so that CalPERS can be paid. So what are some funding options? Okay, and some of these funding options came out of a presentation that was done by CalPERS. It was a very well done presentation where they're actually trying to educate jurisdictions and CalPERS members on exactly what they can do to implement policy or just pay down their unfunded liability to help do some of the things that we talked about in this slide, where why would we want to set aside money or pay more than required. One of those options is called just basically additional payments, and they call it additional discretionary payments, which are ADPs. You can give money to CalPERS above and beyond what they demand each year as part of that unfunded liability cost. So if the city's paying $1 million in unfunded liability, which is close to what it's paying, we can pay $1.1 million. And they'll take that $100,000 and they'll apply it to whatever we want to apply it to. Any of the 7 plans across the board, one of the line items in that mix that I showed you, if there's a strategy that can be worked out where we think that by paying a certain line item may produce better savings in the future, you can do anything pretty much with this extra payment. And you can make a single year payment or you can make multiple payments, ADPs, in a given year if you do have the funds. You have the ability to apply ADPs to any liability component, and it can be used to achieve contribution stability. So we have the $1.75 million set aside. So ultimately, if between now, when we know, at least from a forecast perspective, what our unfunded liability payment is supposed to be in the coming year, if our next actuarial report that we receive next month indicates that that goes up by $150,000, we can make an ADP to mitigate the impact that we otherwise would have on our budget by having to come up with that $150,000 in next year's budget. So one of the options on the table is ADPs. Another option is called the fresh start, and there's 2 types of fresh starts. And all fresh start is basically taking your total liability, either in any of your plans or in all of them together, and actually resetting the amortization period. So right now, you have this rolling amortization where, because a line is added each year, it never stops, basically. That's going to be amortized over 20 years. So this year's line will be amortized over 20 years, and all the other ones get decremented by 1 year, okay? What this does is it takes all of that and says, okay, how long do you want to pay? 15 years, 12 years, whatever, and it resets that value. But what it does is you shorten your time period, raise your payment, which you'll likely have to make, but you're going to save a lot of interest in the end, ultimately, if you're able to do that. The difference between a hard fresh start and a soft fresh start is the hard fresh start is something you actually sign up with CalPERS. Once you sign up, it's irrevocable. You have to make those payments. Whereas a soft fresh start is actually the same thing, but it's kept in the local control, where we're using additional discretionary payments at our control to make those payments over time, consistent with what CalPERS provides in each of their actuarial reports for each plan. They give you a schedule that says, okay, city, if you want to pay this down over 15 years, here's what you have to pay. If you want to pay it over 10 years, here's what you have to pay. So CalPERS is giving you the tool that they would otherwise use. In the hard fresh start, where they're in complete control and take your money, they're giving you the tool to update that every year and rethink your philosophy, which may be important given what CalPERS is doing policy-wise, at least in the short run, may be important to keep that money in the local control. So soft fresh start is just using ADPs instead of actually signing your life away with CalPERS. Right, paying extra on your mortgage payments. The third option is something we have discussed with the City Council before, which is the IRS Section 115 Trust Fund. So these types of trusts can only be used for a specific purpose. Right now, there is a 115 trust that's established for pensions, and you can use this to create a contribution stabilization fund. There are several private options. PARS has one, PFM has one, Keenan has one. And then there's also some legislation out there, SB 1413, that CalPERS is trying to create one for themselves, where they have a stabilization fund as well through 115. So the options are out there. And this is an alternative to funding ADPs directly with CalPERS. Again, this money is in local control. Instead of holding it in your fund, though, when your general fund and your investment portfolio, you're actually turning these monies over to an investment firm or the 115 trustee to invest those at some level of risk tolerance that the city is comfortable with. So there's several different options, very conservative options, all the way to something that's less conservative or aggressive. So this set-aside of funding goes into an irrevocable trust. These funds, once you put them in the trust, can only be used for pensions, okay? But they can be used for ongoing pension costs and normal costs that we know we're going to pay over time, not just the unfunded liability. They can be used for that too, but they can be used for any pension cost. The funds placed with a private entity can be invested based on risk tolerance. I mentioned that. And then what this does is it creates a mechanism balancing contribution volatility and the ability to provide consistent levels of service. So we've seen what's going on with CalPERS in terms of contribution, what we have to contribute to them over time, policy changes, the growing amount, and ultimately, what does that mean to our service level if we have to give more of our budget to CalPERS? Over time, if we have money in this fund, and if it's earning a rate of return that is more than the city's investment portfolio, which is about 1.5% to 2%, if it's earning 4%, now you have additional funds that you can actually make ADPs in the control of the city to lower that unfunded liability over time. So 115 trust is probably the way to go. Final option is do nothing. So basically, do nothing means just make only the required pension payments as annually required, which is what we do today. Actually, we do more than do nothing today because we have set aside funding, recognizing the importance of doing that for the future. Doing nothing could result in continued payment volatility. Actually, it will result in continued payment volatility. Could eventually impact the ability to provide a consistent level of service, as we've talked about. And then we have increased financial exposure to future CalPERS policy changes, just like we do today. And there's more changes coming. This is a hypothetical approach to future funding. The city manager and I actually worked on this together and looked at what we could do to use the $1.75 million that we've set aside, but also, more importantly, recognize that the discount rate that's being used to calculate our unfunded liability is probably too high. Okay, so we actually used a 6.6% discount rate and tried to figure out exactly what the difference would be in the unfunded liability and how we could fund that over time. So the difference in between the UAL at 6% versus the existing rate of 7.375% is $12.1 million. So if you took our unfunded liability and you discounted it to 6% instead of 7.35, it would add $12.1 million to the unfunded liability. So it'd be about $30 million instead of 18. What this funding scenario assumes is the following: that an additional $267,000 is funded each year. Okay, and ironically, as part of the budget process this year, the City Council made a policy decision to include a $250,000 contingency in the general fund budget that hopefully won't be spent. But to the extent it's not spent, it could be added to the $1.75 million each year that it's not spent into this trust fund. So this model assumes that that $267,000 is actually added each year in these 20 years. The funds earn 4% in the 115 trust. This is conservative. Okay, over the last 5 years, this fund has earned 6.72% at its most conservative investment portfolio strategy. So 4% is conservative, and it assumes a 20-year amortization period. And you can see that within 20 years, if we contribute that 267, which was the number that ultimately resulted once we found out exactly what we needed, which was the $12 million, over 20 years. Just ironic that the 267 is close to the 250 that we're putting in a contingency. But some of the advantages of this is it effectively funds our UAL at 6%. It recognizes what the discount rate should be. Experts say it should be at 6.2. CalPERS is bringing it down to 7. And it's my belief that in the future, in the next 10 years, they'll bring it down even further because they'll need to. Makes these funds available for any pension cost. So again, all these funds are available for any pension cost of the city. It mitigates service insolvency. You will have these funds available to you, and you can see how they will grow over time, up to $12 million in year 20, which is basically what it would take to pay off the difference in the unfunded liability at a 6% rate. Those funds will be available to the city to mitigate service insolvency and any issues there. And then most importantly, we retain local control. These funds stay within the control of the city. At some point in time in the future, when CalPERS gets it completely right, and it's consistent, and it's very steady and stable, which will happen eventually, then it may make sense to let them manage everything. But at this point in time, that's not what I'm recommending. So the recommendation is this, and again, with this item, we're looking for any direction you might have, is to continue to fund annually required payments while monitoring the future impacts of CalPERS policy changes. Establish an IRS Section 115 trust fund, which would come back to your city council, controlled by the city, and continue to annually fund an amount consistent with the expected discount rate. So the 1.75 million reserve funding is available now. So we could do something like this strategy, bring that back, and continue to fund that amount. And if necessary, utilize these trust assets to mitigate unexpected increases in required payments and resulting impacts on service levels. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any further questions you might have.
On the unfunded, do you mind if I ask a question? Any questions, Ben?
You're the mayor.
Go ahead, you started.
So on the unfunded liability, that incurs an interest rate as well, right?
Yeah.
By CalPERS? What?
Each year it's recalculated based on, that's what those lines added to each plan
Right,
are,
but
yes.
what is the rate that they're using for the interest rate on what are they charging?
This year it's 7.375%.
That's our discount rate?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right.
But for what's unpaid, do they charge you interest on the?
Absolutely.
What's unpaid? And are they using 7.35?
That's the discount rate. It's implied in there, yes. Yeah. But keep in mind, it's only for new components of the liability, so it will be, there'll be a new line every year.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question, Howard. So, you know, I like the hedging of your bet and put in a little side pot over here when one of the trust funds. What happens to PERS when a lot of cities start essentially pulling the money that would be typically maybe going to their portfolio is now being set off to the side for our own portfolio? Was there any what's risk there to PERS at that point when they're not getting our money?
Because you will be sending PERS what PERS is requiring you to send. So all of their actuarial reports, all their numbers are based on what they're telling you need to pay, which is what we have to pay. Right. So nothing happens if we manage this ourselves.
Are more worried about when cities start to default on their PERS contribution
Exactly.
because they haven't planned as well as we have here in Grass Valley and they don't have the money for it. I think that's the bigger issue. I'm sure you've heard a lot of that out in the.
And there have been examples where cities have not made their PERS contributions, and what ultimately happens in that situation is that the retirees from that jurisdiction, everything is recomputed, and they receive a proportion of their retirement.
Don't get the full amount that's been promised to them through their employment agreement. Yeah. San Jose.
Exactly. That's
Stockton.
exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the way it's laid out here, if I was to take my druthers, I think what is the recommendation is exactly what we kind of talked about in budget and that we have been moving towards, and that I think we're copacetic with moving forward with that. I would hope. I don't know if anybody.
Well, you're going to have to come back for us to vote on setting up the trust, the 115 trust, so.
But the numbers don't scare me. You know what I mean? Like in the sense of that $260,000 a year or so, you know, it seems like we're not looking at millions and millions and millions. I mean, we are in the long term, but that seems like an obtainable number.
I mean, what's our payment, or?
No, the 260 that you talked about putting aside every year, that kind of grows.
So that's additional
Right.
money, and that's what you reference
And a
as
payment
hedging.
down.
Yeah, and I
Right.
think it's
Right.
important that we fulfill our obligation to our retirees and people who worked really hard for the city of Grass Valley.
So this is an administrative item, but if there's anybody who has a question or comment, we invite them to come down now. Not seeing anybody? That part's closed? Okay. So, thank you so much, and I think it went way faster than 25 minutes.
Bearing with me, so.
Right at,
It's so
you
understandable.
were right at you were right at 30 minutes.
Oh, was I?
But it wasn't. It was interesting, so we'll give you the 30.
It felt like 5, is what I was trying to say.
He was trying to be nice.
You were great.
Save the best. We saved the best for last.
What a great report. Thank you so much, and I hope people see that and have an understanding of what our direction is and the competency of our staff, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. Last item is reports from council members. Ben.
I'm first. Well, the 4th of July parade, got to ride in the fire truck in Nevada City, and Della was in there too, my wife, and it was a great day. Great weather. We lucked out with the weather. Also attended the farmers market, and while we were out there, we did see the Downtown Association's little photo booth in front of the mural and the photographer. So we took a family picture in front of that. Really looking forward to seeing the results for that. So when you're down at the farmers market on Thursday, get a picture in front of the mural.
Make a donation.
Make a donation. That's all I got. I know Jan's got a.
Jan's got a list.
I don't. This is
25
This
minute
is waste
report.
management.
Ah.
This is all waste management notes. Let's see. I went to Monterey last week. Last week, I think it was.
2 weeks.
2 weeks ago. For the league board meeting. She keeps my schedule for me. League board meeting, and it was interesting. There was a lot of discussion about some of the initiatives. Obviously, the biggest one that is beneficial to us is the California Roundtable withdrew their initiative, which was the soda tax, which is huge. But it will probably come back in some form in 2020, not put on by them necessarily, but now the healthcare industry is looking at maybe putting one on a statewide level, doing it a little bit differently. So that's something that's probably going to happen. There's also some of the legislators that are introducing or in the process of introducing. They're on recess now until I think August 6th or something like that. Introducing it to make it on a statewide level. So, but that's something that, you know, is in the future, but at least that initiative is off the ballot. It is not going to be on November. And then in the board meeting, we approved a league strategic plan, which will be rolling out at the conference. And I was appointed by the county to serve on their county oversight board.
I recommend that, yes.
So, yeah, that's it.
Because- yeah. Great, and thank you for all you do with the league. Yeah, because we get that great information. It saved us millions of dollars.
And there's stuff actually in the council office that has the league, the agenda and all the stuff that I usually get. So I updated it all over the weekend. So it's in there now. That's it.
Lisa, did you do?
No, I've
Besides the beer booth?
done nothing. I attended the
GVDA board meeting a couple weeks ago and worked the last 2 Thursday night markets. what Ben didn't say when we rode on the fire truck, and Mark, did you bring our plaque? Okay. So the City of Grass Valley Fire Department won Best Fire Department during the 4th of July. I believe it was a combination and a collaboration between fire, city council, but the real winner was Kano and his handler who rode on the truck with us. So we had it all. We had old people, we had kids, we had dogs.
We had it all.
We had everything.
We were the old people.
And the
They were the young people. We had little kids.
I know.
So
Thank you very much for providing the ladder truck for us, and please thank Evan and Kano for coming out.
Evan was a little reluctant and wasn't quite sure how
Yeah.
Kano
The
was
dog-
going to do
the-
on
the-
top of the fire truck.
The dog did well.
And you
so.
guys both worked on the celebration at the fair?
Yeah, and then I spent the rest of the 4th of July out at the fair grounds working for the Grass Valley Downtown Association for our 4th of July celebration, which was very successful this year. We had a great fireworks show. Big crowd. People seemed to be having fun. Marnie Marshall worked very, very hard. She was probably the last person to leave the fairgrounds, so thank you for all your hard work. And come to the Thursday night market, beer and wine booth. This Thursday night, Jan and I will be working.
Jason?
Jason's coming.
Yeah. I'll be there. A couple ERC events. I think everybody read the newspaper lately. Some exciting news in the broadband world. Looks like the sale of Spiral, fingers crossed, goes through into Race Communications. So that should be hopefully something good for our community. Hopefully, an organization that can get some fiber optics in the ground. I think that'll be a good thing. And I did enjoy the 4th of July for my last time with you guys.
So you say?
So I guarantee.
No, but you're still going to, the kids can still come with
My
us.
kids have never seen a parade from the street. I've been on council
Neither
for
has my
8 years, and my
I
son
know,
is
right?
9. He has only ridden on the fire truck. He has no idea that there's stuff in front of
He's-
him or stuff behind him.
He's welcome anytime.
So I do look forward to that, and I will be at the Thursday market.
And so I just, my only good thing about, well, the 4th of July parade was great, and I was really successful in moving it up from 20 to 11.
Yes, and we appreciated
Yeah,
that.
so did I.
We really appreciated that.
And the one thing that we sometimes forget is the flags that are in downtown on the flag holidays. And that is done by the Grass Valley Schools Foundation. And they do it, they get out there early in the morning and get those flags, and they're absolutely beautiful in downtown. And anybody is welcome to find the Grass Valley Schools Foundation and support that program. Inger Avery started it, and it's a beautiful thing for Grass Valley. So just one more thing we enjoy during those holidays. So with that, meeting adjourned.
you.